Thank you once again for your partnership and for your meaningful work you're doing across Greater Houston every day. Let's give another round of applause to our incredible sponsors. Now we're ready to begin with the conversation we've all been looking forward to. I'm Sean McCrory, Editor-in-Chief of the Houston Business Journal, and your moderator for this afternoon's discussion. In my role, I have the opportunity to cover the leaders, organizations, and ideas shaping the future of Greater Houston, and today's topic is one that truly defines the strength of our community, the power of giving. Together, we'll take a closer look at how giving is evolving, what impact really looks like today, and how collaboration across sectors is helping build a stronger, more resilient Houston. Now, let's welcome our panelists to the stage. First up, we have Alvin Abraham, President of ExxonMobil Foundation. Next, we have Meg Booth, President, Performing Arts Houston. Our next panelist, Stephen Ives, President and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Houston. Our next panelist, Lisa Peterson, President of the Houston Zoo. Our next panelist, Del Walker, CPA, Partner with Witham. And our final panelist, Gary Weisterman, CEO of the Holocaust Museum, Houston. Now, as a reminder to the audience, if you'd like to submit a question during the discussion, you can text it to the number displayed on the screen. We'll save time at the end for audience Q&A. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started with the conversation. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to direct the questions at first to an individual, and then once that person is finished, if anyone else wants to then respond to that question, feel free. All right, and we're going to go ahead and start with Stephen Ives with the YMCA of Greater Houston. Stephen, recent federal funding cuts have forced the YMCA of Greater Houston to reduce programming and lay off staff, impacting vulnerable communities across the region. How are you rethinking service delivery in Houston in response, and what gaps are emerging that concern you most?
Thank you. Well, last year is when the massive transformation happened for us, and we went from something to something else. And what we were before was an organization with a whole lot more centers and a whole division that we called our international services, where we housed our refugee resettlement and immigration programming. And so about $40 million of funding went away, and that was representing about 1,500 families that were left stranded. So that was a heartbreaking kind of a period of time for us. But also, you do what you have to do, and you live through what you have to live through for a reason, and we became a different organization today. And our organization today, the way we're rethinking it, is less capital intensive, more partnership focused. And so even with some of our existing buildings, we've begun to program them primarily with other people's work. So we're bringing partners in to actually do the work inside the Y. We always thought that it's a Y building, you do Y programs in it. Now it's a Y building, programs happen in it through partnerships and through collaborations. We're also really thinking about how we can best partner and collaborate for growth and opportunities in other people's facilities rather than building and owning as many buildings as we have in the past.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great segue to the next question I have for Alvin. Speaking of partnerships, Houston's corporate community has long been a backbone of local philanthropy. But energy sector volatility and shifting ESG expectations are changing priorities. How is the ExxonMobil Foundation recalibrating its Houston area investments, and where are you leaning in or pulling back?
Well, as we know, there will always be volatility in every industry, depending on the shifting nature of the economy, geopolitics, and evolving social needs. At the ExxonMobil Foundation and at ExxonMobil, our giving strategy remains mission-based. And we have a clear focus on supporting educational advancement as well as community impact. And so while external conditions may change, our focus remains constant. We also know that that doesn't mean that the world around us doesn't change, so how we respond does change. We take a disciplined approach at working closely to assess both the immediate needs and also the long-term challenges that the community faces. And we do that by keeping a very open dialogue with local partners and our nonprofit leaders to make sure that we have a close eye on what's happening on the ground. And then we work with them to make sure that there's a balanced approach between how we support urgent needs like food insecurity, and then also ensure that we're still supporting the underlying issues that drive inequity, like access to quality education or workforce development. And ultimately, as opposed to sort of pulling back, I'd say that through refining and focusing our investments, we're leaning in and doing whatever we can to make sure that we're providing the highest amount of impact for each of the dollars that we're giving.
I might just tag off
Please.
what these two gentlemen are saying. To say that in the nonprofit sector, change is the only constant, and having a comfortability navigating change is absolutely necessary. As nonprofits, we provide various services amongst us, and we all have to be in the habit of saying no, because it is rare that as a nonprofit, we have the funding to say yes to all of the needs and demands that our organizations have. So I might also just add that change is the only constant, and that's something that we have to navigate very, very well.
One of the things that I bring to my role is that I spent the first 20 years of my career as a classroom teacher, as a school principal, working in the nonprofit space. So I understand exactly what you're saying. And so we do our best to sort of remove those barriers, and as I mentioned, just stay as closely connected to our partners, because I know firsthand how those shifts can increase the number of calls you get or the things that your students might need, and how important it is to provide support for those gaps.
Alvin, as somebody who spent the first 20, 25 years of my career in education and K-12 schools as a principal and a teacher, we should probably compare notes after. But Meg, you said something that I thought was absolutely fantastic, and it underscores what I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is that, and this is only going to become more the case, as nonprofits, we have to balance agility on one hand, because the world is always changing and we have to be able to adapt, with remembering what our mission is and being able to focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Lisa, the Houston Zoo has made major investments in conservation and campus redevelopment in recent years. With rising operating costs and changing tourism patterns in Houston, how are you balancing long-term capital vision with short-term financial realities?
So I think piggybacking on what Gary just said, staying mission-centric is one of our core tenets. But we start with a strategic plan, and our strategic plan lives for about 3 years. And so that helps us with big leaps that are going to push us forward in the short term. And then with bigger planning for master plan and things like that take place over a longer periods of time. I think what's important for us to remember at the zoo is there is so much support for the zoo in this community. And so when donors and members and guests and tourists come to visit us, making sure that we maximize the funding that we receive. And so thinking through, and we think through different things at the zoo, so it's about guest experience, but it's also about the welfare of the wildlife that's in our care and making sure that we're providing the best possible well-being. So we're thinking through those things as it relates to big capital planning, and then making sure that we're thinking through the infrastructure that supports it. So that as you think about this great new habitat, what's the other infrastructure that you can take care of so that we're not going back and having to retrace our steps or spend money unnecessarily. So really thinking about how we spend. And we think also in terms of capital, so a big capital campaign that I came in the tail end of most recently, that is one type of campaign. But the other capital that we have to manage is protecting the assets that we're responsible for, making sure that the things that we've built and that we've been able to provide our community stay in good working order. So we look at the big capital campaigns. We also look at the capital that is within our in our budget, and how are we using and leveraging that. And then short term, we think in terms of, we're very fortunate, people come and they visit the zoo, and so by visiting the zoo, we try and earn surplus, and we take that and then we apply that to some of those more short-term needs and some of those capital needs. But it's really guided first by our strategic plan and then by our master plan. All mission focused.
Yeah. Meg, back to you. Houston arts organizations are still rebuilding audiences post-pandemic while facing increased competition for discretionary spending. What are you seeing locally in terms of audience behavior, and what is working or not working in bringing Houstonians back into live performance spaces?
Thank you for the question. It's interesting, if you look at the last 10 years, Houston has navigated Hurricane Harvey, which was pretty decimating, particularly for the theater district, the pandemic, which brought the curtain down for a number of years for a number of organizations, and more recently, political changes and economic changes. I am very happy to say that Houston actually bounced back much faster in terms of returning to theaters than our partners on the East Coast. Some of our East Coast counterparts are still struggling to bring their audiences back, but audiences have changed. Although we're seeing numbers high again in the theater district, we have to earn those ticket sales one ticket at a time. And people are making choices much later, which means predicting behavior becomes more and more difficult. Analyzing the data of what those sales patterns are becomes more and more critical over time. Transparency and clear marketing, clear messaging are very, very important. So, at times our marketing department says that it's harder every single year because selling art, you have to reinvent that every single year. So there are challenges that percolate through, but I think the big story for Houston is that our audiences are back. They are enjoying our performances. In the theater district, maybe some people don't know this, we offer over 1,000 performances a year. We sell over 1 million. I think the last year was 1.3 million tickets a year. That's before all of the access programs that bring people into the theater for free. So it is a robust part of our culture.
Absolutely. Gary, Houston's one of the most diverse cities in the country, yet also navigating rising polarization and debates over education and historical narratives. How is Holocaust Museum Houston engaging local schools and communities in this environment, and where are you encountering resistance or opportunity?
Well, first of all, thank you for starting me with the safe and completely non-controversial question. That's appreciated. Look, polarization is where we live. That's the world today. For what it's worth, as a relative newcomer to Houston, I actually feel that we're a little more insulated from it here because of the nature of our community than in other parts of the country. But the challenge is real. There's absolutely no question about it. One of the most important things I ever read was the Reed Lecture, 1954, 1956, something like that, by C.P. Snow. It was called The Two Cultures. And he talked about the fact that 2 is the most dangerous number, and that attempts to divide anything into 2 should be regarded with much suspicion. And polarization, to me, is the political polarization, the cultural polarization that we're seeing in the country right now, to me, is instantiating that in a really very dangerous way. And that means that for organizations like ours, things that would have never been thought of as political before, all of a sudden fall into political categories, and they're very binary. Coming from a primarily educational background and running an institution that is primarily educational in nature, we see that in a whole lot of ways, where organizations look and say, boy, we want to avoid, to the best of our ability, anything controversial. That makes them risk averse, particularly schools. The challenge for that, of course, is that one of the biggest reasons schools exist, not the only one, but one of the biggest reasons, is to help people become citizens. And that means civic engagement. And you can't do that without an appreciation for nuance. And you can't appreciate that without an appreciation for difference. So for us, that means that out of fear, sometimes, I guess, from bad actors, but for the most part out of fear or confusion. We sometimes find our purpose as an institution being misframed, that it is somehow conflated with contemporary events, that it's somehow conflated with the current war or with concerns over DEI or what have you. And for us, that means that we constantly have to be repeating, not only to external audiences, but to ourselves, this is who we are. We are an educational institution that is rooted in a museum. We protect memory, but we teach lessons that aren't just about the Holocaust. They're relevant to anybody who cares about living in a democracy, in a just society, in a world that's ruled by law, and that is governed by compassion. And those are what we call the 5 universal lessons of the Holocaust. I'll probably find a way to work those into my conversation later today. But the good thing about this is that organizations, schools in particular, are looking for places that they can practice this sort of discourse. They're looking for trusted places that are able to speak authoritatively about important things. And so that challenge becomes an opportunity for us because that's what we're all about.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate that. And Dale, so we've covered a lot of hard topics sometimes. You offer a very unique vantage point. Look, advising Houston.
Saying I'm odd. But.
No. You offer that perspective that I think a lot of the folks in the room will appreciate. You advise the affluent families in Houston area. What are some of the most immediate financial stress signals you're seeing right now? Again, we're covering heavy things here.
Sure. So,
and whether tied to inflation, donor pullback, or funding shifts, and which types of organizations are most at risk?
so thank you for having me up here. So I've done this before, and this is a great honor to speak with this group and be up here with this group of people here that are leaders in our city. But what I'm saying, and the trend is, the capital markets in the U.S. for the last decade have been on fire, turbocharged, right? Equity returns averaging 15, 20%, and the power of compounding is a real thing. Money doubles every 10 years at 7%. Well, the stock market was growing at 17, 18%. So money was doubling, in effect, very quickly. What you're seeing is the level of affluence in our country and in Houston. We are consistent with that, is rising. But it's not rising universally across the board, all right? That's one of the reasons organizations exist, to help with basic needs. But you talk about signals, right? So last week, there was the national debt exceeded U.S. GDP for the first time since World War II. All right, I'm not an economist, but the signal signs when that happens is we could be heading towards an inflationary environment. Now, that it may not stay there, it may change, but that's a signal sign. And all of these organizations, are impacted by inflation. If they have capital needs, they're exponentially impacted by inflation. So their needs to draw in funds to meet their services to their community are going to cost more, which means they have to find a way to meet those needs, whether working with partners in the community or the donor community at a higher expanded level. So I think that is out there. A trend that I have seen, and I've seen data, for those of you out there that aren't aware of it, there's a great study that Bank of America does in conjunction with the Lilly School of Philanthropy at the University of Indiana. And it talks about, they've been doing donor surveys for a decade or more. And there's some very interesting data in there that if anybody wants it, give me your card and I'll send you the link to it. But it's interesting. And I saw in that what I've seen with my client base, donors are supporting fewer organizations than they did 10 years ago. 20 years ago, Houston, go to the East Coast, you talk to people, we were known as the check writing city. People supported philanthropy here. They wrote a lot of checks in a lot of places. The city still supports philanthropy. But I think what you're seeing is certain generations approaches, the boomers are now kind of there. The group before them, most of them have passed away, unfortunately, or very few are left. And their view is we want to have more impact, and we view impact as fewer places to go with our funds. But depending on our influence, we may put more money on the table for the organizations. That also creates risks for the charities that, okay, we have fewer people supporting us and they're giving us more money. That's a bit of a dual-edged sword, right? As long as everything is working well, things are good. But what happens if a key donor falls out of the mix for whatever reason, and the hole that comes with it? So I think those are some of the trends that I'm seeing on the donor side. Talking to some of the folks in the panel, this is not news to any of these people up here, but this is not just a Del Walker experience, a Houston thing. This is very much a national trend. And how do you, it's like leverage. It's like having debt in a business model. How do you use that to achieve what you want? But it's certainly, there are risks that come with it exponentially. Everybody's like, great, give me more money, but you have to figure out how to manage that, because if you get hooked on it and it goes away, that there are challenges that come with it. So,
Steve, as a not-for-profit with significant earned income, how has that earned income framed your philanthropic work historically, and how is that changing? Again, change is the one constant we've been talking about. What opportunities do you see as well for the not-for-profit communities in the area of philanthropy?
Yeah, so the Y has historically been seen as, oh, you've got a lot of members. I see a lot of cars in your parking lot. You must be doing just fine, which is true in a lot of ways. And one of the benefits of operating, I call it a social enterprise, where a significant amount, it can be up to 70 or 80% of the total operating budget is funded by earned income. It's awfully easy to get caught into the trap of that's what we do, or that's what we do best, that's all we do. But it also can frame the minds of philanthropists and people in the community. And so sometimes it's a bit of an uphill climb to explain that, yeah, we do have gyms and we do have pools. However, there's a whole lot more to it. And it's a harder story to tell sometimes. And what historically that's done is cause us to really focus. I'm talking about decades. In the YMCA world, and this isn't just in Houston, we've tended to lean into what people believe we are and what we're good at. And so we just do more of that. And in some instances, this one in particular, let's borrow some money, let's let that low interest rate environment be the driver for being able to grow our business. And what the reality of it is that all works when it's all working, but it also doesn't work so well when you have Harvey, COVID, inflationary pressures, government interruptions, all of these kinds of things that change the environment substantially. And so what we've really worked hard at over the last few years is to help the community better understand that we're not a place or a purpose. These buildings we have are just tools through which we do amazing things and create the environment for amazing things to happen. And so we've gone from a model previously which was raise 10 or 20, maybe 30% of what's needed to build a thing and then borrow the rest, to 100% of what we build is supported with philanthropy. So it's been a big adjustment for us. I think for the people who love the work that we do and believe in us and get the chance to hear the full story of the significant impact, and also understanding and appreciating the fact that my salary doesn't get paid by philanthropy. We're not raising money to support an infrastructure. We're raising money to expand and build upon what the earned income helps make possible. And so that whole narrative around the social enterprise, the idea that we can handle most of the day-to-day stuff, but if you really want to help us go beyond that and live into our true potential, the philanthropy needs to step in. So we're shifting, making some pretty dramatic adjustments into how we handle capitalizing our work. I mentioned earlier, we're building less, or we're moving away from some of the buildings that might have been funded with debt financing, and taking some of our assets that were gained from that and finding ways to redeploy them, which is a very business schooly, business kind of thing that sometimes people in the not-for-profit sector gloss over about. The reality is, though, the business people appreciate it. They appreciate that, and I think we're finding that. So I don't know about other organizations who have had zero or very low earned income. I think for them, the challenge, the opportunity is, hey, wait, it's great if we can leverage some of what we're great at for that people will pay us for some of the things, or they might pay us for a new thing that we'll provide. I always encourage people who are running organizations, don't go as far as the Y might have gone, but think about ways in which you can monetize the great work that you do and take advantage of this robust economic environment that we're in here in Houston, and at the same time make it about creating the space where the philanthropy goes directly to those who are greatest in need, and less of it goes for overhead and infrastructure.
I think you bring up a really great point about business. So I have a predominantly for-profit background, and I've only been in nonprofits for about coming up on 9 years. And I was, and going in from a for-profit world into a zoo is a very interesting
They're both the same.
change. Yeah, I use the term zoo very differently now than I did then. And so, but what I was thrilled to learn was that what I knew about business and how I had helped. So I worked in hospitality for a long time, and I managed portfolios of hotels for big institutional owners. And so learning how to be nimble and learning how to business plan and learning how to integrate data to make good decisions as quickly as you can. And that's all very, it'll gloss your eyes over as well. But it was part of my life and part of the most important part of my job. And I find myself drawing on those skills now so that I can think about the data that we need. How do we integrate it? How do we interrogate it? How do we make decisions faster? How do we honor both the philanthropy dollars that we earn, but also the dollars that we earn through our gate and through experiences and things like that at the zoo. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. I'm on our accrediting body is called the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and I'm on their board. And one of the things that I think about a lot and the things that are coming up is how do we thrive? How do we're so woven, zoos and aquariums are so woven into the fabric of communities, and they're so important in what they offer, but how do we continue to thrive in an economy that like we have now, where funding's eroding at the federal level, where you've got a political climate that may not be as open to what we're trying to bring to the table. It just, you have to become more nimble, and how do we start offering that to our members? And so I think that's probably been my biggest takeaway, and I'm so grateful. You know, I joke that I wish I had gotten to this place sooner in my career, because I love it so much, and I learn every day, and I have the best team on the planet. I love my job. And I think, gosh, I wish I could have gotten here sooner. And then I realized timing's everything. And everything happened for a reason, so that I was ready to be able to step into this and be able to bring something that's hopefully meaningful, that makes a difference for as long as I'm doing it. So
I love this conversation because as nonprofits, we have to thread a very uncomfortable needle. Budgeting becomes very difficult because any surpluses we make over a budget needs to go back into mission. And yet we have to be wildly resilient, especially here in Houston, and build levers into your annual budgets that you can move around should any negative things impact your ability to bring in either earned or contributed revenue. So at least in the arts, you're seeing a lot of different things that a good benchmark is to have 6 to 9 months of an operating reserve just to make sure that you can navigate changes. You're seeing a lot more arts organizations start to rely on endowments so that you can guarantee a kickoff of some philanthropic dollars. You know, it is a lot easier to raise money for programmatic initiatives than it is for general operating money. And that general operating money is necessary because if you don't have staff to execute those programs aren't going to happen.
You know, it's funny, I'm sitting here listening, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, all three of your organizations have a significant portion of your income as earned revenue. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to decide if that's better or worse than the situation we're in. A relatively small part of our income is earned revenue. And part of that is because we're mission and message based, we do everything we can to bring people in. When students come and visit, it's free. When somebody comes in and says, boy, I really want to come visit the museum, but I can't afford a ticket, come on in. And so a very small amount of the money we bring in is earned. something like 93% of our revenue is actually through philanthropy.
Wow.
On a normal year, anyways. What that means, on one hand, things like endowment become even more important for us. I know best practice for our sort of institution is that 20% of our operating budget should be drawn from endowment. Well, there are very few message-based institutions that can say they do that. We want to, but we can't. But I'm fascinated by this because despite the disparities in what we're talking about, almost every challenge and risk that you've described is the same as what you're facing. And so I'm wondering how important the manner of revenue is in terms of dealing with the same sort of constancy of change.
So again, I'm the odd one on the panel, and at least about her background. I'm going to use a dirty word in this element, but it's in effect, we're talking about competing for philanthropic donations, and that there's an element, there's a finite amount of money out there in a donor pool, and all these great organizations, in effect, I'm going to use the C word, are competing for it. And to give you some perspective, and affluent is a relative term, right? We can all sit here and define it. But let's say someone's worth $5 million liquid, not insignificant amount of money. That is viewed as affluence. And then you have the ultra affluents, the John Arnolds of the world, and so forth. But if you look at kind of the demographics of people that may be worth $5 to $10 million liquid, if you look at where most of their philanthropy goes, this is going to show you the competition I'm talking about for these fine organizations. 40% of it goes to religious organizations. Another 15, 16% goes to basic needs and services. Think of the food bank, things of that nature. And then it goes to secondary education. That leaves 30% of the pool to go to other types of very worthy, appropriate, the arts, the zoo. I almost think the Holocaust Museum may fall within, you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely does.
Right, but that shrinks the pool, which then probably pushes that their donor base, they have to move to the higher end of the donor base because of the volume. They can't rely on perpetual $5,000 or $10,000 donations. They have to move into the billionaire type space, people worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's a small, finite group. So a plug for the HBJ here. So 2 weeks ago, y'all had an article that came out that talked about the philanthropic giving of like the top 40 or 50 billionaires in the U.S. It was a good article. Now, is it exactly accurate? No, it's what's public, but it's in the ballpark. For our city and our state, we're in a great place. There were 6 people on there from Texas. 4 of them were in Greater Houston. There's probably 2 others or more out there that didn't make the list. So that's a great place to be for our city and our state that maybe isn't true in other places. But anyway, I go back to, you're looking at that's you can't just go to everywhere to get where you need. You've got to be very specific, very targeted. And those are probably the same people that other organizations are also approaching from an impact standpoint. Is that a fair assessment? I don't think the pool's big enough that everybody can have one, so to speak. So
That is true, but it's also true that Americans give less than 2% on average of their income to philanthropic purposes. The biblical standard of 10%, there's a lot of room between 2 and 10%, is the way I look at it. Now, I love organizations like United Way that create this easy way for people in the workplace to learn to be philanthropists and have a great experience with that. I think there's a challenge and an opportunity out for us collectively to raise the bar. I had a friend who used to, on his license plate, he had 5%. I was like, what is that? He's like, if we could get to 5% of giving in the United States, there'd be a whole lot of problems solved. And I think that there's some nugget in that for all those of us who are involved in philanthropy. I always feel like when we're out asking people for money, we're not asking for people for money, we're giving them an opportunity to place their philanthropy in a really valuable way. Support a mission. Yeah, and support something and to better themselves by being part of that. There's a lot of our fellow Americans they're missing out on that opportunity. And so I just offer that up for everybody who's in this business. How might we go to 5% in terms of giving in, just think about the greater Houston area.
I will share this with you as someone that sees lots of tax returns
Yeah.
for people that are making $500,000 a year or more, or have net worths well in excess of $10 million. At the highest end, 5% may not be achieved, but when you look at, let's say, compensation income between $500,000 to $1 million, those people are well within the 5% to 10%.
Yeah.
It's when people get to the billionaire level, that's a big number to go to 5%. I'm just it's from that. But the other element that you start to see is what it takes in people's view as families. What does it take to support our family? Because, there can be folks out there that have $1 million, and, the data is showing that group is donating less today than they did 10 years ago. And the number one reason they're giving is, I don't feel like, this is how I talk, all right, I'm a redneck from Oklahoma, but we can't let go of it. We need it for our family to take care of us. And so I think it's kind of skewed on both ends. I think, that's not an insignificant amount of net worth, or, someone making $200,000 a year, but because I think things like inflation, cost of living, they're like, I don't know if I feel like I can get to your example, that 5, where 5 to 10 years ago, there were more people that were comfortable saying that. So that's an interesting thing. I don't think that's a wrong thing. I think it's a personal definition about what creates comfort within a family, because people, I think, they're gonna take care of their families first before they outreach and do other things, and that evolves over time. Again, that limits that donor pool that can be reached out for those impact elements. So say something. You're going to say something profound, I can tell.
Listen, I'm always about to say something. I'm hearing this, and to me, the issue is less whether it's 2% or 5%, and whether it's coming from more or fewer. For so much of what we do, the fundamental question, and I actually believe this is the fundamental question we're going to be facing, is one of perception, about whether what we do is optional, whether it's a luxury, or whether it's part of the civic infrastructure, right?
And thus it needs to be supported as I am a member of the civic community, I need to contribute to the support.
That's exactly right. We have the fastest growing city in the country.
Agreed.
We have the most diverse city in the country.
Agreed.
All of these things come with wonderful opportunities, and that growth requires infrastructure. And zoo is part of that. The Y is part of that. The performing arts are a huge part of that, especially
the for-profit world says you need capital. You
Right.
need capital to support what you're doing.
That's
Again,
right.
that's a dirty word in the nonprofit world, but that's in effect what it is. You need capital
the
to
lifeblood.
support the mission, the lifeblood from that standpoint.
One of the things that I'll add is, I spent the latter 10 years of my career fundraising as well in the nonprofit space, and what I learned is that the more people are able to sort of see firsthand what you're doing, and you guys do this all really, really well, the more they're going to give. And we wrapped up at the end of last year our employee giving campaign, and we raised $16 million for local charities here in Houston, one of the biggest campaigns in the city. And one of the things that our team really worked at for the last couple of years was increasing the number of volunteer hours that we do in the community. And we saw a direct correlation with when we brought kids' meals to campus and packed 10,000 meals for kids in need. They were one of our top places that we gave to. Similarly, the zoo, we hosted 2 cleanup days for employees there and saw an uptick in the number of donations that went to the zoo from the company. So, the more we can get in front of and see the really amazing work that you guys are all doing, and we're fortunate to call all of these folks partners on the stage, the more we can see, I think, dollars coming to support the critical work that you do in the city.
And I love that point, because that's all about access and exposure. And not everybody has equal access and exposure to all sorts of services, to arts, et cetera. And so, creating access programs and giving people the opportunity to meet people and make it welcoming to participate in the arts is very, very important, definitely part of our mission.
One thing, I'll put this back to you, Alvin, and this builds off of a comment Steve made earlier about applying philanthropy where it's most needed. And one of those areas which we haven't discussed yet is workforce development. We talk about the one constant is change. Well, that's where a major change is occurring, is in the workforce, energy transition, AI. How is corporate philanthropy here in Houston aligning with workforce pipelines, and what roles should nonprofits play in preparing Houston's future workforce?
Workforce development remains a critical challenge here in Houston, but all across the world. You drill down a little bit deeper, particularly though you see an incredible need in STEM roles and the skilled trades. We know that it needs to be more alignment between education and industry needs to help solve the problem. But the business case is clear. Right? STEM jobs by 2033 are going to grow by more than 10%. That's more than double all other occupations. So we know for Houston to continue to be a global leader in innovation that we have to do more and double down there. The other thing I'd say there that it's not just about filling jobs. It's about making sure that every young person has the opportunity to obtain the skills to thrive, right? No matter what their background is and what zip code they live in. And we've been doing some really great work in this space. We've contributed as a company and as a foundation over $1.6 billion specifically in education, but really with the focus in STEM learning and increasing outcomes in that space. But we really sort of have doubled down in the last couple of years doing a few different things to make sure that we're expanding that STEM talent pipeline. We're really going deeper, starting in elementary school, working with middle schools and high schools to make those connections all the way through. And I'll share a couple of examples. One, we started what we call our teen engineering and tech centers. And they're after-school STEM learning spaces for high school students who run the free and reduced lunch program. We've got 2 centers here in Houston that we just started a couple of years ago. We partnered with Khan Academy to do what we call the Open Doors Project, which aligned all of their resources to the Texas state standards for grades 3 through 12 to make it much more accessible to students, but also teachers as a resource. And then we're partnering with the University of Houston to train and upskill math and science teachers in Title I schools. Now, we do this work alongside a lot of other things we do in this city, including supporting the Y with bringing mobile STEM units to communities to engage more students directly in the STEM space. And we do so wanting to make sure that students, particularly growing up in underserved communities, have access to opportunities to access these high-demand STEM jobs. We're seeing some pretty solid early results. Students who participate in our teen engineering and tech centers are outperforming their near peers in critical subjects like Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 and biology and chemistry. Khan Academy, since we started the program, has delivered 106 million learning minutes in STEM education in the last 18 months. And we've trained and upskilled 70 middle school and high school math and science teachers at Title I schools in the Houston area, and our plans are to grow that by 200 teachers annually by 2030 in partnership with U of H. Those are just a few of the examples, but I think the most important part is that this can't be done alone. It has to be done in unison with folks who are doing really, really good work. And it really is going to take collaboration amongst academia, government, corporations, and nonprofits to really put a dent in this issue.
So interesting you bring that up. I've always believed up till about a year and a half ago that workforce development is sort of this niche for the educational institutions, for people who have built out not-for-profits that do college readiness. And someone said, how many employees do you have? So I was 3,000, 4,000. What are you doing to develop them as a workforce? I thought, oh my gosh, we give them a great experience. I run into people all the time who tell me, oh, my first job was at the Y. And that's great. But if we had a little more intentionality around when you come to work at the Y, our expectation and hope is that you will have a career, whether it be with the Y or the Zoo or with Exxon or anywhere. And so we started thinking about internally, how do we begin to have some more intentionality around that, and then got drawn into the Resiliency Workforce Development Collaborative, and there's 50, 60, 70 organizations all doing their niche piece, but as a collaborative, talking about how we do this for collective impact. And so we're now going to play our role as a fiscal agent facilitator for larger grants that are going to draw, I hope, a lot more money into our city eventually for the great work, the amazing work that's happening on the ground in the space. But to be able to say, as a result of that, 30,000 people were impacted for your $1 million or a couple $1 million investment. So I think some of us who might have been on the sidelines on workforce development thinking, that's not our lane, I'm starting to realize it's everybody's lane. And it is.
It's our city's lane.
It's our city's lane.
If I'm piling on, stop me, but we are an infrastructure city, right? This is an industrial complex city, and whether you like it or you don't like it or whatever, our future is tied to power, electricity, and energy. The ability to turn the lights on, and our country has a decaying not economic, but a grid that is going to have to be redone to transmit power differently than it is now, whether you like data centers or not. Everybody has an opinion, but they're there, they're happening, whether you like Elon Musk or not. He said, 3 days ago, he's going to start a program to train, I don't know how many thousands of electricians to work in the data center world. Okay, data centers won't be built for 30 years, but those skills can be redeployed. And we are a city that has always embraced the trades in addition to higher secondary level of education. And I think it's part of our city's future to help build that part of the workforce. I mean, I look at what I paid a plumber yesterday to do some stuff on a house, and it's like, it's not a bad coming out of school job. Electrician, the same thing. These are folks that can be valued, contributing members of the community, and definitely make enough money to give back. And I think cities like ours are more geared toward this than other cities because we're more of an industrial complex city. And no offense, buddy, we are not going to be Detroit. All this stuff they talk about, we're going to be Detroit someday. We're not going to be Detroit. It's a great thing, but we're going to be Houston.
I should probably clarify, I'm originally from Detroit.
I'd also just like to say that workforce development doesn't always have to be at a grand scale. For many nonprofits that are relatively small, paid internships bring one person in for 3 months and give them 20 hours a week where they can learn from your team, giving them that 1 foot in the door and 3 months of training in a work environment makes a difference for that one person. So don't be afraid to take small steps if you're a small organization. It matters to that person.
Lisa, I want to transition to another constant for Houston Beyond change, and that's extreme weather events, which we've touched on a little bit already. How are these conditions affecting operations planning and visitor engagement, particularly at the zoo, but across the city? And what investments are required for us to remain resilient?
I moved here from San Diego, so I have survived my first summer. I moved last May. I think I can certainly speak for the zoo. So we are not only our team members who are impacted. A lot of our team works outside. So whether it's freezing cold or very, very warm, they're outside. Our wildlife is also impacted by it. And so trying to make sure that we find that balance, and then we add on the layer of our guests and having their experience and knowing that we're reliant on our earned income to reinvest in our zoo, in our city, in our community. And so some of the things that we're looking at in our strategic plan and in our master plan is looking at ways that you can create comfort and sort of space it out. So we want you to be outside, we want you to be under the live oaks, we want you to see how beautiful our zoo is. And then maybe you're going into an area that is cooler, like the Galapagos area, and then you're stepping outside again. So trying to think through how your journey through our zoo is going to work and giving you those moments of respite. Thinking about one thing I learned here very, very quickly, we had an outdoor event at the zoo last July. There was not a lot of shade at a big portion of the event, and that was very specific to a habitat. And I learned if you have air movement and a little bit of shade, you're not in the direct sunlight, you can navigate it better than we think. And so really thinking about what do those outside spaces look like at the zoo, and how do we reinvest in canopy and shade and air movement. And think that through for guests. And then also for our team, we do very specific training for our team so they know the signs of heat and cold, and we have our ride-out crews and things like that. So for us, it has to be intentional. It's what we think about every day, and it's what we'll have to learn to grow into as we move along, because I could tell you that one of our next projects is going to be another giant indoor building, but the fact of that is you're drawing on energy, and that, no matter how you feel about the climate, it is changing. And one of our core beliefs is that millions of little change can create really big change in the world. And so we want to be a good representative of what that change could look like, and we want to embody the change that we're asking people to embrace. So having to find that balance of how do you navigate it on the outside and celebrate nature and the natural world, and then how do you offer those areas of respite. So for the zoo, I think it's going to be a work in progress for the foreseeable future.
All right, now that I've exhausted all the hard questions, let me throw a really easy one at the entire panel. What are you seeing as the greatest unmet need in Houston right now, and how are nonprofits, or how should they be responding?
I'll jump in.
Please do.
Typically you'd go to housing or safety and those kinds of things, but the most recent Kinder study really elevated this idea that we're not talking to each other. We're just not communicating with each other, and everything in the algorithms are driving us further and further apart. You talked about division earlier on, and I think at the core of many of those other problems or issues in our community is the fact the solution sits in let's talk to each other. The solution sits in let's get to understand, let's have curiosity with people who have very different points of view, because they may not really be so far away from us as we think they are. The Kinder study talked about how what we believe and what we believe others believe, and then what they believe and what they think we believe, these massive disparities, but then when you put them together, we both are pretty close. And so if you think of that as just a litmus test for what's possible in our community, as not-for-profit leaders, we're community leaders. We're connectors in various ways, be it through the arts, be it through experiences, be it through just education or whatever you want to be part of. We're connectors, and so if we collectively were able to build a community in which there was just a lot more talking to each other in meaningful ways and a lot more connecting with each other, I think from there the solutions to whatever the problem of the day might be are going to more readily evolve. One of the things that really fascinated me the first year I was here, so I come from New England, had never seen a hurricane. I'm supposed not to use that word, I've been told, but the H word thing. I'd never seen or experienced that, and the first one that I saw, it was extraordinary. To see the way we step up for each other is as if every difference went away, and we're all Houstonians for those moments to care for each other and to unite against this thing that's attacking us. I just think that there's the fact that we don't talk to each other, and the fact that the algorithms and each other, we're helping each other to feel more distant, more apart from each other, is the foundational, fundamental, biggest problem in my mind to be addressed for our community.
Amen.
Yeah. I think our greatest opportunity is to show our community, especially youngsters, what's possible. Because when you think about your museum and a just world, and you think about people having their first job at the Y, and you think about the arts and the creativity and how we learn to problem solve and be inspired and think about things differently, or just even opening our minds to the greater world and how we fit into it, and that we have fewer differences than we do than we think we do. And I think when I'm new meeting some of you this evening, but I think about the possibility that we create just by being here and what that will mean to our community today. And then as those youngsters go out into the world, and even adults for that matter, as we go out and share that, what are we doing to create a bigger difference in the world? And that's what I see in our nonprofits, and I think that's our greatest opportunity.
So I have an opinion on this, and I'm the yeah, I have. They're like belly buttons, we all got one. So, this is what I see as a member of this community since '91. And it kind of ties into, I think there's going to be an ongoing increased need in people needing basic assistance, basic needs being met. If the government approach continues that social programs continue to be paired or capped, and we've talked about some of the economic disparity and some of the other comments I've made, I think they're going to be, it's not a Houston thing. In fact, I think we're better than most. We have some great organizations in the city that have done that. They've been on these panels before. I think there's going to be an increasing need. And it's not people that see themselves in that role today, but because of things like hyperinflation or good jobs. In other words, they are not able to get a job in the trades where they get skilled to be a plumber or whatever, and they're working in a situation where they're working for minimum wage. I think there's more people that are going to be, I'm not going to say poverty, but assistance needs. They're one paycheck away from having a challenge. And and as this city grows, and it is growing, both of these people on either side of me came here in the last year. I mean, that's who we are. And I think all of us came here except you're a native who left and came back from that standpoint. That's what I see, and I'm not going to say, I don't think you say, does our city have a homeless problem? I think the infrastructure exists to deal with it, and those people a lot of them choose the lifestyle. But I do think there are an increasing number of people that are going to need basic assistance needs. And as our city grows, I think it's going to kind of grow proportionally. And I think it's going to be impacted if federal spending continues to be pulled back in these areas. Community is going to have to fill that void if it's going to be filled. That's just my personal.
One thing that I'd love to add, I agree with everything that everyone has said so far, and I think, as I think about, one thing, a lever that we could pull, every single person sitting in this room can remember a teacher that changed their life, right? And as I think about even all the solutions or the ideas that people brought up, like having a phenomenal teacher in every single classroom in our city would absolutely solve almost every single problem that we're talking about. Not immediately, of course, but long term, right? And I think that the more we can do, even from a small scale of you just loving on your kids' teachers or engaging with your local school to support the teachers there, or supporting policy that ensures that teachers have appropriate training and pay to deliver instruction at a really, really high level for their kids, or to really think outside the box and partner with organizations in different ways to make sure that happens. But I feel like a really great teacher in every classroom that has the resources they need and understands the curriculum and is able to deliver it with the type of pedagogy that is transformative for a kid is such a problem solver with almost every single thing that we've talked about.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. We'd now like to actually turn it over to you, the audience. So if you'll please welcome back to the stage Tracy for our Q&A part of the program.
Well, this has been an incredible discussion, and I have some very good questions here from the audience. So first one is from Joshua Mason, Development Director of H-Town Dream Center, and this is for anyone. As Houston donor priorities continue to shift, what trends are you seeing in funding opportunities for faith-based organizations serving vulnerable communities and at-risk youth?
So my experience coming from New England to Texas is that if you lean into who you are and what your faith-based, what it means for your organization, that there are a lot of people in this community that that really resonate with that. So in New England, you don't talk about it. talk about your faith or Christian emphasis or those kinds of things. But in the Houston market, I think the philanthropists really resonate, many of them. There's a whole very significant group of philanthropists who, if you're a faith-based organization, I think are going to be even more interested in helping you do the work that you're called to do by your faith.
The data would support, what did I say, affluent families, net worth $5-10 million and up. The first 40% of their giving is religious-based. So if you combine that with needs, that, again, the data says that's 50+% of what it is. I echo what he says. This is a city that, I was telling somebody, I have this hokey thing. I say Houston's the city of the 5 Fs, right? It's a family city, all right? It's a faith city. And we're not just talking about Christianity or Judaism. I mean, the number of synagogues and mosques and Hindu temples and churches in the city, it's people are open, they're proud, and it's part of the fabric of who we are. And then you throw entrepreneurship into that, which is free enterprise. I think there's a perfect mixture here, but you got to lean into who you are. And you got to look for the people it's going to resonate with, because the whole population probably won't resonate with you, but there is definitely a part of the population that you will find that intersection point, and that's where you can optimize it.
And recognize that the intersect may not only be with that faith. There is so
Agreed.
Sorry. Can you still hear me? There is so much commonality across different faith groups, and there's so much common need. We talked, Steve, you mentioned how when push comes to shove, there's not really that much dividing us, was one of the messages from the Kinder Institute. Well, the values also unite us. And it's true that within the faith-based community, as well as everywhere else, you're not limited with who supports you based on the faith.
No, because the value overlap across these communities is immense. There may be certain, all right.
That's right.
There may be subtle differences in the religions and so we don't get into it, but the values, that's what I see in this city. That faith-based component of our city is what reinforces these values that are consistent across all of these various faiths and perspectives on how they see things.
All right, well, thank you. Okay, this next question comes from Stephen Bowden from Houston Grand Opera. Data collected from the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University shows that the last decade has shown only decline in the percentage of American households choosing to give to nonprofits. What's one practical thing you'd recommend be done differently or better to motivate non-giving households to become givers?
So the same data also says if you can, you're seeing it, there's a definite rise in service happening in conjunction. And oftentimes in the past, you saw service separated from financial donor contribution. They were kind of like, well, I'm a donor or I'm a service person. There's starting to be an intersection, and that seems to be, if you go into the data and you look at the report to it, and I've seen this with clients, when you combine those two, it's a powerful intersection because of the alignment between the donor base and the organization increases, and there's also a correlation there with the donor base being able to willingness to contribute more than they would if they weren't involved in service. So I would say I think that's an opportunity. It's easy to say, but that's the opportunity that I see, is if you can create those greater alignment points. Everything seems to be saying in the world of philanthropy around financially, it's about there's an exponential overall return around alignment intersection and increasing it. So if you can increase involvement, you can increase this. Everything seems to, it's like the Richter scale. It seems to go exponentially, not linear, from a linear basis, if that makes sense.
You said earlier that families are feeling pressed in terms of the resources, so they're going to turn inward, and that's about self-interest. However you hold self-interest, good or bad. I like to often encourage people to tap into what I call enlightened self-interest. This is good for you. Here's the value you can get. I think that's what you're getting at, the intersection between I might get involved as a volunteer or engage or as a philanthropic supporter, but I get something from it. And that's not a quid pro quo. That's about make sure that there's value. And so if we can figure out what those families that might be distancing themselves from philanthropy, what do they need most? We often lead with what do we need most, but if we could figure out what do they need most and find a way to have the intersection between what we're doing and the opportunity we're providing them and their needs, I think we might be able to help turn that tide.
It's not, like you said, it's not a quid pro quo. They're looking for something specifically. They're going, this resonates with me. This makes me feel better as a person, makes me feel better about the community I'm a part of. It's a deeper level of connecting to people rather than, I get tickets or something like that, which is, we've all done that too. But you know what I'm saying. It's looking to connect with people at a deeper level around what the organization's mission is.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'll go after you.
No, please, you go first.
I also think that success isn't a once-in-a-lifetime transformation. It is the habit of daily practice. And in looking at those households that don't contribute or don't participate in a nonprofit organization, one of the best things you can do is peer-to-peer asks. Ask every one of your board members, ask the engaged people in your organization, hey, do you know anybody that might be interested? Why don't you bring them? Why don't you show them how much fun, how fulfilling it is, how light you feel after you've experienced or learned something about animals or gone to an exquisite performance. So peer-to-peer, one at a time. It takes time and can be done.
One of the things that, as we built our headquarters moved to Houston officially in summer of 2023, and one of the things that we did right away was build a strategy to support the Houston community. And, we love this place, and we want it to be a place that attracts top talent to come work at the company. And so when we're partnering with a lot of our cultural institutions specifically, we're providing support to amp up cool and exciting new programs that will attract and draw folks here. But one of the things that we do paired with that is making sure that those institutions are also really accessible to people that generally don't have access to it. So paired with that is like an education series where we're bringing students through for free shows or tours, or providing a free day at the zoo that we know that families who normally can't afford a ticket are able to come and engage. And so as I think about the Grand Opera, for example, Houston Grand Opera, for example, or anyone, it's like, what can you do to help someone that maybe has been a contributor for decades, or at least a season ticket holder for decades, and catch their eye with something like access, right? To get them to sort of translate from being a ticket holder to a donor. And I think that's a critical thing to consider and think about too.
Excellent. Okay, here's the last question, because then, and we can't get to all of them, unfortunately, because we have some networking to get to. And this question's anonymous. How has your fundraising efforts changed to engage younger donors? How has digital giving and social media changed the relationship between fundraising, advocacy, and public engagement?
I think there's a couple of questions built into that. The first is generational. We know that younger generations aren't as quick to affiliate. They're not as quick to think in terms of institutional affiliation so much as ROI. And so there's automatically going to be a difference there. The other thing is the mechanisms by which we've historically reached out aren't as effective with those generations. I recently, look, mass mailings are not dead, but I recently had a conversation about this with a group of young prospective donors, and the response that I received from them was something along the lines of, I immediately toss the mail that I get from the mailbox into the garbage. I'm much more likely to respond to a text or respond to social media or something that I saw on TikTok. And so there's a few things that are built in there that I think are worth thinking about.
I'd add to that here just quickly that I think the challenge and the opportunity is a large percent of the affluent donors that exist don't involve their children or their grandchildren in their donative efforts. And this is not a judgment statement. That's a challenge and it's an opportunity. The challenge is the days of, well, this is what the Kennedys do, the Kennedys support this. That is not the world we live in now. And so when someone passes, that support may pass, but if you can increase that engagement through going through the senior generation and ask to bring them into the dialogue and pull them in a way they want to be pulled in initially, I think that's a tremendous opportunity, because I see that with my own clients, and you look at it and it shocks me how few have, how much they're giving and how few they've involved children or grandchildren in the process, something they're so passionate about. And you ask them, do they not feel passionate about it? And they go, well, I don't really involve them. You don't know. You don't know if they have that passion or not. And I think, you would go, it'd be better if the donor did it, but potentially partnering with the nonprofit to help see if that spark is there, I think is also a tremendous opportunity from that standpoint.
We have some mechanisms at the zoo, so there's different types of memberships and ways for you to begin supporting us in easy ways. And so one of our memberships is specifically around younger professionals. And so learning about what we do at the zoo, speaker series, different things that we offer that are valuable to the community, specifically that audience. And then we do lend ourselves, and we're very fortunate in this way that we have generations that are connected. They came to the zoo as a youngster, and now they're kids, and then they're grandkids, and so on. And so we try and really take advantage of that and really think about when we do events and when we host and think through our planning calendar for the year, how do we create events where you can bring your kids and your grandkids and it becomes this whole family affair so that they can see themselves in it, whether it be a membership, whether it's just a great day at the zoo. It all starts somewhere. I love your point of you just put one step in front of the other and one person at a time. And that may not be that big, easy way to do it, but it's effective, and it really makes a meaningful difference because you can recreate that muscle over and over, where trying to do something really big is going to be harder to recreate.
All right, well, let's give our panelists a big round of applause. So thank you so much. It was a very incredible conversation. And on behalf of HBJ, I'd like to thank, of course, all our sponsors, our panelists, and each of you for being here today. We're also very excited to share that HBJ will be launching a new podcast in the next couple of weeks that'll be led by, 1 week, okay.
1 week from today.
All right, so we're very excited about that. It's going to, of course, have conversations with some of Houston's top business leaders, many of you in this room. And of course, as always, we have a full lineup of upcoming events and open nominations, so please stay involved with us. You're going to see QR codes on the screen for about events, nominations, special discounted subscriptions, and more. And so now, if you'll please join us in the lobby for some cocktails, light bites, and networking. Thank you so much.